DLC is one of the best or worst things you could ever put in your video game, depending on who you are. On paper, it seems like a no-brainer for any game. A game you love 1 to 2 years after it originally came out getting more content sounds great, but the closer we look, the more the lines start to blur. What is DLC really? DLC stands for downloadable content, or stuff you add on to a game that you already own. It could be free or it could also be paid for. When did this start though? You would think maybe with the 7th generation of consoles, where the early stages of online started to exist, but in reality, we can pinpoint the first DLC to this guy right here. The Super Nintendo Satellaview was a Japanese exclusive broadcasting service that gave you temporary access to a bunch of different games. It allowed developers for the first time to add content to existing games. While you've probably heard of BS Zelda before, which is a 16-bit remake of the original Zelda, F-Zero got 2 different updates, BS Grand Prix number 1 and number 2. The first update added 1 new track and 4 new vehicles, and the second update added a whole new Grand Prix, a new league, and a practice mode. Although this is technically DLC, it was only temporary. For a specific time period, Nintendo would broadcast these out, and for that time period, you could download and play them. But once it was over, they were completely gone, and a lot of these were lost for decades. It wouldn't be until the 6th generation of consoles where we start to see the DLC we know today. Not so much out of Nintendo, we were still gonna have to wait a couple years for them to do any DLC, but the PlayStation 2 had a couple different instances of it in some of its bigger titles. Metal Gear Solid 3 had this feature where if you connected to the online and you have beaten the game, you could download a bunch of different camos for it. A lot of them celebrated holidays, like the Santa camo from Christmas 2004 or St. Valentine for Valentine's Day 2005. But to be honest, you probably didn't know these existed, at least in the original game. From this release of Metal Gear Solid 3 and on, if you beat the game, you will just get all of these camos. To access these in the original though, you needed this thing called the Sony Network Adapter. Unless you had a PS2 Slim, then they were built in. This allowed you to connect your PS2 to the internet via Ethernet and only Ethernet. None of these models support Wi-Fi. A ton of games actually supported the online, but it was mostly for multiplayer. DLC was few and far between. Xbox, for better and for worse, completely changed online gaming, and in conjunction, DLC. Xbox Live completely blew any semblance of competition out of the water, and it set a new gold standard for how online should be going forward. It also has one of the first examples of paid-for DLC in Halo 2. In 2005, 1 year after the original game came out, Bungie released 9 new maps for $19.99, which you could buy online or as a physical game. Now, I couldn't find any metrics on how well this sold, but if you know anything about Halo in the early 2000s, I think it's a fair assumption to say that this did pretty well. The big kicker for me though is just barely a month later, all of this would be made free. If a game company did that nowadays, it would do terribly. But with that, the industry fate was set, and DLC would quickly consume pretty much everything you saw. Whether it was free or paid for, if it was a large release, it probably had some form of DLC. No matter what era we look at, it feels like a lot of the ideas and things we get have just kind of stagnated. If we zoom out and we look at a bunch of different genres, we can kind of guess what kind of support it's going to get. If it's a fighting game, you'll probably get some new fighters. If it's a shooter, you're probably going to get some new maps. And no matter what genre it may be, you're probably going to get skins. Nothing conflicts me more than skins in video games. I would have been the first person to tell you how cool it would have been if we got skins in Smash Ultimate. Metal Sonic over Sonic, Funky Kong over Donkey Kong. It was like a dream for me. Then I look at what we actually got, and it's a fate worse than death. Maybe it's because they're attached to the lamest, most uninspired characters in the series, but every single time I saw a Mii Fighter trailer, I had to pray to God it wasn't a character I actually wanted in the game. Dante, Doomslayer, Cuphead, Shantae, all really cool to have in Smash in some form, but come on. Nobody wants their most wanted fighter as a Mii costume. Smash skins are pretty harmless though. They're at most 75 cents. It's not gonna break the bank. Unlike this, they could add Jesus Christ of Nazareth to Fortnite tomorrow morning, and I still would not try that game. Naruto, Optimus Prime, Peter Griffin. Okay, I lied about that last one. That last one isn't real. But it still would not make me try this game. All really cool and insane that they're represented in a video game, But for $15 a skin, I can't believe anybody is buying these. I have seen small children with genuine investment portfolios of Fortnite skins. How is this worth it? Fortnite brings up one of my least favorite thing companies do: special currencies. Let's say I magically woke up tomorrow and I really wanted to get into Fortnite, but I only want to play as LeBron James. Well, if I want to buy him, he's going to be 1,500 V-Bucks. What are V-Bucks? It's a made-up currency that's not doing too hot compared to the dollar, but it's the only way you can buy stuff in Fortnite. So let's say I want to spend the least money possible in order to buy him. The smallest number you can buy is 1,000 V-Bucks for $7.99. The next tier after that is 2,800 V-Bucks for $20. So you either A, have to buy two 1,000 V-Bucks plans, or B, go to the next tier. But oh, you'll have extra V-Bucks after you buy LeBron, so it's probably worth to go to the next tier, right? Taking away what LeBron costs, you're left with just enough to not buy any of the cool skins, like Master Chief or a Stormtrooper. Sure, you can get some of the original creation ones from Fortnite, but the system is specially curated to make you spend more so you get less. And it's not just Fortnite doing this too. I had to spend $15 to buy Rashid, and I had to buy him because that's my friend's main. Why can't I just spend what the character's actually worth? The number one response I always get is, oh, why don't you just buy the season pass? It's way cheaper. There has been this new acceptance of buying content before you even know what it is, and I cannot wrap my head around why. Buy the deluxe edition and get all unannounced DLC for free. Buy the fighters pass and get all the characters we've yet to announce. No idea what you're getting, when you're getting it, and hopefully it's something you like. Let's say back in 2014 you bought the digital deluxe edition of Assassin's Creed Rogue. First of all, I'm very sorry for your loss. I can't imagine spending full price on a game like this. But what do you get for this? You get 2 new missions, a bunch of cosmetic stuff, and this really cool thing called the Time Savers Pack, which half of it just tells you where collectibles are on the map. Even Ubisoft knew players didn't want to explore or play this game longer than they had to. DLC has become such a volatile hit or miss that I can't rationalize pre-ordering it for almost any game. You could hand me a free copy of Marvel's Avengers and I would still feel some form of ripped off from this quote-unquote Spider-Man DLC we got. He moves like Spider-Man in a GTA mod. It's genuinely embarrassing. But take a game like Dark Souls, Notorious of the Lost Abyss. For only $15, I feel like I ripped From Software off. New armor, weapons, areas, spells, bosses. But what makes this really special for me is how well it flows with the actual game. Artorias is a character that's talked about a bit throughout the entirety of the original game. He's a legend, and you hear tales of his heroics from a bunch of different NPCs throughout the game. You have this insane fight with his companion Sif, who guards his grave, and the DLC takes you back in time to experience the legend for yourself. The fights are just as crazy as any Dark Souls bosses, and it blends in so well with the mythology and lore the game has built before it. I will always, with confidence, pre-order the DLC for any Soulsborne game because I know it's probably gonna bang. You might have noticed pretty much everything I've brought up so far is about paid DLC. Free DLC does exist, and it's becoming more and more popular, but to be honest, I kinda hate it. Whenever I think of free DLC or updates, I think of this unholy trinity of Mario sports games. I've talked about this before, but if you look at Mario sports games when they're done getting updates, they all look amazing. Super in-depth rosters, outfits, game modes. For some of these games, they are definitely in the conversation for best in their series. But if we look at the launch version of these games, it is a whole other story. Let's say the final build of the game is a sandwich. You got your meat, lettuce, tomato, all that good stuff. When we jump to the launch of these games though, sometimes you're barely left with 2 pieces of bread. And over the course of half of the year, you're given your lettuce, tomato, your meats, and eventually you get a really good sandwich. But why didn't you serve me the sandwich to begin with? It feels like DLC in these scenarios was used to artificially elongate the game's life. All of these game modes and characters would have made these launches outstanding, but instead, we got games that felt like they were incomplete. Of course, there are plenty of examples of free DLC being really nice bonuses, but even at their best, I can't recall a single time free DLC has ever made me come back to a game. They're nice attempts, and if you're a super fan, it's probably all you dreamed of and then some, but I can't help but feeling like a lot of DLC just completely misses the mark of what they're going for. We have gotten a ton of DLC in the past 2 decades, more than you probably realize. Although there's a ton of repetitive, uninspired slop, there's always that Dark Souls or Cyberpunk DLC every once in a while that makes me hope for a better future for DLC. But in conclusion, DLC is... And you don't seem to...